This segment of the Alice Stewart Show is brought to you by Aero Plumbing. For all your household or business plumbing needs, call Aero Plumbing at 1-866-PLUMBER or schedule an appointment online at aeroplumbing.net.
Welcome back to the Alice Stewart Show, 7:35. Young Guns this morning with Josh Blevins, former Young Democrats of Arkansas president and Blevins Investment Group chairman, and Brett Hooton. He is a Saline County Election Commissioner and Young Republicans. Member of the Young Republicans. Brett and Josh, great to have you here.
Good morning.
I want to talk about the story that just captivated everyone yesterday, is the shooting there in Ottawa, Canada. That's one person killed as well as the shooter. And details are coming out very slowly, which I think is not a bad thing. It's better to be slow than inaccurate. We know that the shooter was born, his name is Michael Joseph Hall, born in Canada, and had recently converted to Islam and changed his name to Michael Bebu, and he had been radicalized. We're going to want to listen to Ed Henry. He's going to recap the story of what we know happened yesterday, and it could mean certainly, without a doubt, heightened security there in Ottawa, but certainly security concerns here in the U.S. Here is Fox News correspondent Ed Henry.
The FBI has already put out bulletins to field offices across the U.S. suggesting they've got to be in a higher threat posture, at least. Be prepared because of sort of a increased chatter among ISIS and the potential that they could be involved. Not that they are, but that they could be. Something I pressed Josh Earnest about.
The United States for quite some time now has been cognizant of the threat that is posed by foreign fighters or by individuals who could be radicalized in this country. The effort to counter violent extremism is something that the administration has been focused on for years.
President Obama got off the phone with Prime Minister Harper of Canada, obviously expressing condolences, but also to get on top of this situation and try to get the latest about the investigation.
And what we do know at this point is that the shooter went to what is the War Memorial and shot one of the members of the Canadian Royal Police who was providing security there, and then went into their Parliament building and opened fire, 30 to 40 shots, and he was killed inside that building. Josh, your thoughts on this?
It's a tragedy. You know, if Britain is America's best friend in the world, Canada is almost like our twin brother.
Right.
It's a tragedy, and you know what happens to Canada essentially, happens to us as Americans. It reminds me of September 11. Of course, that was on a much bigger scale. But when folks around the world, in Canada, at Buckingham Palace, they raised the American flag and they all said, we're Americans. They did the same thing in France and elsewhere around the world. But it brings home the important thing to remember, which is that we're always focused on, maybe external aggressors who would come to our country and attempt to do us harm. But what remains just as large of a threat, and what historically was a larger threat in America until the tragic events of September 2001, were homegrown domestic terrorists.
Right, and that's one of the major concerns with the growth of ISIS is that they will recruit and radicalize people, and whether they go over to Syria or wherever they go, the fact that they can come back, and that's one of the biggest fears. Brett, your thoughts?
Yeah, it's really disappointing to see something like this, and I think that unfortunately it's the new face of terrorism that we have, where we have these younger people, and this guy was relatively young. He was 32, but you see it as well with those that are even younger. You heard about those three teenage girls just a few days ago that were trying to travel over to Turkey to get into Syria. Three American girls, and so that's what's scary about this. I think it's the new face of terrorism in the Western countries. You see the Canadian. It was a Canadian soldier that was killed, but he wasn't at an active military base. He was at the National War Memorial in Ottawa. And I saw where we recently increased security at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier in Arlington. So we have those places all over the country. And so that's what's so disturbing about this situation now is, 12 years ago and even more recently, we were fighting Islamic radicalism and terrorism over in the Middle East. And now that we're not doing that, it's more of a bigger concern here at home. They don't have to go to the Middle East to kill Americans.
Right.
They're trying to do that here. So it's going to require a vigilance. It's going to require looking out for the radical nature. This was something that the Canadians had identified him as a high-risk traveler. They seized his passport, so he was not unknown to them. So the intelligence agencies are looking at it, but unfortunately, there's just so many unprotected places. You can't secure everything, and these things, as we saw in Canada recently happen, and it's tragic.
Right, and this was clearly something that had many people on alert, and it comes in the wake of another incident earlier in the week where an Islamic convert ran over 2 Canadian soldiers, killing one of them. Many now are fearing a string of terror attacks that could be in progress, and as you said, Josh, the homegrown terrorists are the big concern. President Obama addressed the concerns, but also the need to make sure that the U.S. stands strong in support of Canada.
When it comes to dealing with terrorist activity, that Canada and the United States has to be entirely in sync. We have in the past. I'm confident we will continue to do so in the future.
Brett?
Well, I mean, obviously that's the case, and Josh framed it very well at the beginning. It's like our twin brother. When you see that something happens in Ottawa, I noticed, on the news yesterday, when something happens, major happens in a country overseas, the reporters that usually get sent over there are the ones that were probably already there and the ones that are less familiar. When it happens in Ottawa, you see the main people you see on TV because it's that close. It's basically in our backyard.
Right.
And so the president's right in this case that Canada and the United States need to be on the same page, sharing information, looking at vulnerabilities, and trying to address the problem of ISIS recruiting these people. I know the one a few days ago that ran over Canadian a few days ago. It was reported that he was inspired by ISIS. And so that's still the problem. ISIS and the Islamic radical groups in the Middle East that are spewing out propaganda and recruiting these people are still the problem, and that has to be taken care of.
Josh?
It's important to note that there's a difference between a bona fide connection to a foreign terrorist organization and one that and an act that is inspired by a foreign terrorist organization. And we need to reassure people that there's no connection that has been purported between of coordination between any foreign religious extremists and those in Canada. So that's important to know. But it is, we've got to stay vigilant. This is part of living in a free society. I read an article from last year. The Canadian, the Sergeant at Arms, who is largely seen as a kind of a ceremonial role. You always see him in the United States. We have a Sergeant at Arms, and they carry the mace down in front of processions, and put it on the dais at in the Senate chamber every day, and that's. But they have a real role to play, and they just like they do in D.C., they do it in Ottawa. They're in charge of security, and the Sergeant at Arms who ended up being the fellow who shot the shooter yesterday and disabled that threat said before he took office, "I'm only willing to take office if I don't have to put up walls and barricades around the Canadian Parliament building, because it's important that people are able to interact with their legislators and feel like their government is open to them." So these sorts of threats, which always unfortunately end in new security measures being put in place. If anybody's visited Washington D.C. Since 2001, you've seen these incredible security measures, and they're necessary. But it's unfortunate that we have these threats in a free and democratic society. But that's just part of a liberal, free, democratic society.
And I clearly anticipate the security will be heightened significantly there in Ottawa as a result of this, as it should be. But we'll see how they do that. We will take a break, and when we come back, we're going to talk midterm elections and some of the recent polling data in these big races that many already voted. We know that Josh has already voted on the first day. We will come back with our young guns, Josh Blevins and Brett Hooton, to talk midterm elections after this on the Alice Stewart Show. This segment of the program brought to you by Aero Plumbing. For all of your household or business plumbing needs, call Aero Plumbing at 1-866-PLUMBER or schedule an appointment online at aeroplumbing.net.